In the Screwtape letters, C.S. Lewis used satire to reveal profound truths about life, society, and culture. He revealed practical and for-all-life insights in defense of the Christian faith, including strategies the believer can use to defeat the devil's subtleties and temptations. You will encounter Screwtape, an experienced devil, as he mentors his young protege and nephew Wormwood. Senior devil, Screwtape, ceaselessly coached Wormwood on effective strategies for tempting the human being, a new Christian he was assigned to bring down. Their devilish ultimate goal is ensnaring the young Christian with beguiling and seemingly harmless temptations, thereby leading him on a gentle but steady pathway into damnation. As a satire, the author uses ironic reversals throughout the 31 letters of the book. Screwtape and his co-devils call God, our Father in heaven, the enemy, while he calls Satan, our Father below. He called humans vermins and two-legged animals. Heaven is light and perdition is nothing. The book uncovers deep spiritual truths about human weaknesses, foibles, hypocrisies, and ignorance about what motivates their actions. The devil blew the whistle on both of his frontal and subtle attack methods. These strategies also show Christians how to overcome the devil's temptations even today. Its lessons and practical applications cannot be fully explained in a few pages. But for me, highlighting these key points aids in better understanding. 1. Desiring their freedom, he therefore refuses to carry them, by their mere affections and habits, to any of the goals which he sets before them. He leaves them to do it on their own, and there lies our opportunity. But also remember, there lies our danger. If once they get through this initial dryness successfully, they become much less dependent on emotion and therefore much harder to tempt. In this part of the letters, Screwtape discusses how God, desiring true freedom for humans, avoids manipulating their emotions and habits to automatically guide them towards him. Instead, God allows humans to make their own way. This means that faith and spiritual growth must be attained through deliberate and conscious choices, rather than merely passively following feelings or established habits. The opportunity that Screwtape mentions refers to the demon's ability to tempt humans during these periods of initial dryness, moments when spiritual emotions are not intensely felt and the journey seems solitary or difficult. During these periods, people may be more vulnerable to temptations because they may feel disoriented without the usual emotional impulse associated with faith. However, Screwtape also warns of a danger. If humans manage to overcome this dry phase, they become less reliant on emotions to sustain their faith. This makes them much harder to tempt, as their faith is more based on a conscious and committed decision rather than fluctuating with their feelings. 2. You will say that these are very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. Screwtape, the experienced demon, chastises Wormwood, his nephew and apprentice, for his potential fixation on spectacular sins or major evils. He emphasizes that the primary goal is not the gravity of the sin itself, but the cumulative effect of these sins in distancing the soul from God. Even minor sins are valuable in the temptation strategy, as long as they lead the soul away from the light and towards the nothingness. The analogy that murder isn't better than cards, if cards can do the trick, illustrates that effective temptation doesn't need to be grandiose or dramatic. Small moral failures can be equally or more effective in diverting a person from their spiritual path. Lewis describes the safest path to hell as a gentle slope, easy to descend without the person realizing the progress towards damnation, because there are no sudden changes or obvious warnings along the way. 3. Do not be deceived, Wormwood. Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring, but still intending, to do our enemy's will, looks around upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken and still obeys. Screwtape warns Wormwood that the demonic cause is in great danger when a human, despite no longer feeling the desire, continues to intend to do God's will. This moment occurs when the human looks upon a universe that seems entirely devoid of God's presence, questions why they feel abandoned, yet still chooses to obey. This is a test of truly pure faith, devoid of emotional or spiritual comfort. The choice to obey without the comfort of emotion or visible certainty is extremely powerful because it represents a faith based on will and commitment rather than on feelings or signs. It is an example of unwavering faith that does not depend on rewards or external evidence. 4. There is nothing like suspense and anxiety for barricading a human's mind against the enemy. He wants men to be concerned with what they do. Our business is to keep them thinking about what will happen to them. Screwtape highlights the effectiveness of using anxiety and anticipation to close a human's mind against God, the enemy in Screwtape's terminology. God desires humans to focus on their actions, on what they can do in the present to live according to Christian principles. In contrast, the demonic strategy is to distract humans by making them obsessively worried about what might happen in the future, fostering fears and uncertainties that may never materialize. This approach works because anxiety consumes mental and emotional energy, leaving fewer resources available for spiritual reflection, prayer, or actions that reflect Christian teachings. Worrying about the future can paralyze, preventing individuals from acting in the present or fully surrendering to God's will. 5. It is no doubt impossible to prevent his praying for his mother, but we have means of rendering the prayers innocuous. Make sure that they are always very spiritual, that he is always concerned with the state of her soul and never with her rheumatism. Screwtape proposes that Wormwood manipulate the way the human prays, ensuring that their prayers are always very spiritual. That is, he should focus solely on salvation and the spiritual condition of his mother, ignoring her earthly needs, such as relief from physical pains, exemplified here as rheumatism. This type of prayer may seem noble, but in reality, it can disconnect prayer from the practical and immediate needs of the person being prayed for. The idea is that by concentrating prayer solely on spiritual aspects, the practitioner may become alienated from earthly and everyday concerns that are also important to the Christian faith, which teaches compassion and comprehensive care for others. 6. Prosperity knits a man to the world. He feels that he is finding his place in it, while really it is finding its place in him. Screwtape describes how prosperity can make a man feel like he's finding his place in the world, when in reality, it's the world that's finding its place within him. This process of finding one's place isn't so much about the individual shaping the world according to his values, but rather the world shaping the individual to fit its structures and materialistic values. Prosperity can be seductive, causing a person to feel comfortable, secure, and satisfied within the world's systems, to the point where they begin to integrate these materialistic values into their own identity. 7. If, on the other hand, he is aware that horrors may be in store for him and is praying for the virtues wherewith to meet them, and meanwhile concerning himself with the present, because there, and there alone, all duty, all grace, all knowledge, and all pleasure dwell, his state is very undesirable and should be attacked at once. Screwtape describes a situation where a human being is aware of possible future horrors, but instead of dwelling on these fears, turns their attention to prayer for virtues to face them. Simultaneously, they focus on the present, recognizing that it is in the here and now that duty, grace, knowledge, and pleasure are found. This state of presence and readiness is seen as highly undesirable for demonic forces because the individual is cultivating precisely the qualities, courage, prudence, wisdom, that make temptations less effective. 8. When he talks of their losing their selves, he means only abandoning the clamor of self-will. Once they have done that, he really gives them back all their personality and boasts, I am afraid sincerely, that when they are wholly his, they will be more themselves than ever. Screwtape, with his cynical and distorted perspective, describes the transformation that occurs when a human abandons the noise of self-will, the incessant demand for control and personal satisfaction. He reports that according to God, by renouncing this selfish self-assertion, individuals do not lose their identity. On the contrary, they regain their true personality. God returns to them their entire personality and asserts that, once fully devoted to Him, they will be more authentically themselves than ever before. This process is depicted in a way that seems alarming and undesirable to Screwtape, as it leads humans to a deeper closeness and greater dedication to God. 9. All extremes, except extreme devotion to the enemy, are to be encouraged. Screwtape advises Wormwood to foster all kinds of extreme behaviors in humans, with the exception of extreme devotion to God. The reasoning is that extremes in almost anything else can lead to disorder, conflict, obsession, or isolation, all of which can divert a person from a balanced life focused on God. Extremes such as consumerism, fanaticism, moral rigidity, or even obsession with hobbies and interests can create barriers between the individual and God, making the person more susceptible to demonic influence. 10. If you can once get him to the point of thinking that religion is all very well up to a point, you can feel quite happy about his soul. A moderated religion is as good for us as no religion at all, and more amusing. Screwtape suggests that if the human reaches the point of considering that religion is all very well up to a point, then the demons may feel satisfied with the progress of their temptation. A moderate religion, treated as something useful only in certain situations or up to a certain limit, is, according to him, as beneficial to the demons as no religion at all, and is even more amusing because it keeps the person engaged in a form of religious practice that never reaches its full potential. This kind of superficial faith can be manipulated to never seriously challenge the individual's worldly desires, behaviors, or beliefs. 11. The enemy's human partisans have all been plainly told by him that suffering is an essential part of what he calls redemption, so that a faith which is destroyed by a war or a pestilence cannot really have been worth the trouble of destroying. Screwtape reflects on the notion that human followers of God, the enemy, have been clearly informed that suffering is a necessary part of the redemption process. In other words, suffering is not just a possibility in a Christian's life, but an expected and instructive aspect that contributes to spiritual salvation. Screwtape suggests that any faith that can be destroyed by disasters like wars or plagues was not strong or valuable enough. It is seen as fragile and easily disposable, and therefore not worth the trouble of destroying. This viewpoint is expressed in a cynical and manipulative manner, characteristic of the demonic rhetoric in the book. 12. Once you have made the world an end and faith a means, you have almost won your man, and it makes very little difference what kind of worldly end he is pursuing. Screwtape suggests that once faith is reduced to a tool for achieving worldly objectives, the process of corrupting a person's soul becomes much easier. The true essence of faith, which is the pursuit and worship of God as the supreme end, is subverted when turned into a means to attain success, comfort, or power in the material world. This inversion causes the person to lose sight of the true purpose of faith and prioritize their worldly goals over their spirituality. 13. He cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. Unlike God, Screwtape highlights that God cannot tempt people to virtue in the same way that demons tempt them to vice. God, desiring humans to learn to walk for themselves in spiritual terms, sometimes needs to withdraw his hand, allowing them to face challenges and make mistakes. This process is essential for genuine growth in faith and character. It's important to note here that if the will to walk, that is the intention to live virtuously, is present, God rejoices even in human stumbles and mistakes because they are signs of effort and part of the learning process. 14. Hence, we always try to work away from the natural condition of any pleasure to that in which it is least natural, least redolent of its maker, and least pleasurable. An ever-increasing craving for an ever-diminishing pleasure is the formula. Screwtape reveals that the goal is to take the pleasures of the natural state, where they are most authentic and reflect God's goodness, to a state where they are less natural, less evocative of God, and ultimately less pleasurable. The idea is that by doing this, humans experience a constant increase of desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure. This is the formula for creating insidious dependency, where the individual is driven not by satisfaction, but by the need to alleviate the ever-growing desire that is never truly satisfied. 15. As long as he retains externally the habits of a Christian, he can still be made to think of himself as one who has adopted a few new friends and amusements, but whose spiritual state is much the same as it was 6 weeks ago. Screwtape suggests that while a human maintains outwardly the habits of a Christian, such as going to church, reading the Bible, and praying, they may be led to believe that their spiritual state remains unchanged, even if they have adopted new friends and entertainments that are not aligned with Christian values. This scenario highlights the disconnect between the external practices of faith and true inner engagement. The danger lies in believing that the maintenance of external routines is sufficient, while the heart and mind gradually stray from Christian principles. 16. The great thing is to prevent his doing anything. As long as he does not convert it into action, it does not matter how much he thinks about this new repentance. This subtle tactic that demons employ to weaken a person's spiritual effectiveness, preventing good intentions, such as repentance, from translating into practical actions. Screwtape, the demon mentor, is essentially explaining that no matter how much a human may think about repenting and changing their ways, as long as those thoughts do not translate into actual actions, they are harmless from a demonic perspective. This reflects the idea that true transformation and spiritual growth require more than good intentions. They demand concrete and visible changes in behavior and daily practices. 17. Active habits are strengthened by repetition, but passive ones are weakened. The more often he feels without acting, the less he will be able ever to act, and in the long run, the less he will be able to feel. Screwtape describes that active habits, those involving concrete and decisive actions, are strengthened each time they are practiced. On the other hand, passive habits involving inaction or hesitation become weaker with repetition. The crucial point here is that the more often a person feels something without acting on that feeling, the less capable they will be to act in the future. Moreover, eventually, this inactivity not only diminishes the ability to act, but also the ability to feel. 18. About the general connection between Christianity and politics, our position is more delicate. Certainly, we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life, for the establishment of anything like a really just society would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably, of course, as a means to their own advancement, but failing that, as a means to anything, even to social justice. Screwtape, the demonic mentor, explains the delicate approach demons must adopt regarding the connection between Christianity and politics. He emphasizes that ideally, demons do not want Christians to allow their faith to influence their political life significantly, especially if it leads to the creation of a truly just society, which would be seen as a disaster from the demonic perspective. However, if faith must influence politics, demons prefer it to be in a way that serves individuals' personal advancement or any other end that may distort the original purpose of Christianity. This illustrates the idea that faith, when used as a means to an end, can be diverted from its goal of promoting justice and truth. 19. I see only one thing to do at the moment. Your patient has become humble. Have you drawn his attention to the fact? All virtues are less formidable to us once the man is aware that he has them, but this is especially true of humility. Catch him at the moment when he is really poor in spirit and smuggle into his mind the gratifying reflection, "By Jove, I'm being humble." And almost immediately pride at his own humility, will appear. Screwtape, the demonic mentor, suggests a subtle way to corrupt a human's humility. He advises Wormwood to make his patient aware of their own humility. By becoming conscious of their own humility, the patient may start to feel pride in this virtue. This is a deeply rooted paradox in human experience. True humility is compromised when it becomes an object of pride. Screwtape emphasizes that once the human recognizes themselves as humble, they may begin to take pride in their humility, which is actually a form of pride, the antithesis of humility. 20. Nothing matters at all except the tendency of a given state of mind, in given circumstances, to move a particular patient at particular moment nearer to the enemy or nearer to us. Screwtape encapsulates the essence of spiritual warfare by emphasizing that nothing is more important than the direction in which a specific mental state leads an individual at any given moment. The demonic objective is to manipulate circumstances and thoughts in such a way that the person moves away from God and towards the demons. On the other hand, divine actions and spiritual influences seek to move the person in the opposite direction, toward God. The struggle, therefore, is not just about good or bad actions in themselves, but about how these actions, motivated by certain mental states, align on a larger spiritual continuum between God and evil. 21. Anything, even a sin, which has the total effect of moving him close up to the enemy, makes against us in the long run. Screwtape, while discussing demonic strategy, indicates that anything that leads a person closer to God, even if it is a sin, is ultimately counterproductive for the demons. The central argument is that if a sin leads to genuine repentance, greater self-awareness, or recognition of the need for God, then that sin serves to strengthen the individual's relationship with God in the long run. This is a reflection on how God can use all things, even human errors and failures, for the spiritual good of people. 22. False spirituality is always to be encouraged. Screwtape suggests that encouraging a spirituality that is superficial or distorted, namely a false spirituality, is an effective tool to keep people away from a true connection with God. This false spirituality can take various forms, such as empty rituals, spiritual pride, obsession with substance-less mystical experiences, or a faith that focuses only on external aspects and fails to transform the heart and life of the practitioner. The goal is to make people feel spiritually fulfilled without actually drawing closer to God or experiencing any genuine change in their lives. 23. But hatred is best combined with fear. Cowardice, alone of all the vices, is purely painful. Horrible to anticipate, horrible to feel, horrible to remember. Hatred has its pleasures. It is therefore often the compensation by which a frightened man reimburses himself for the miseries of fear. The more he fears, the more he will hate. And hatred is also a great anodyne for shame. Screwtape discusses the relationship between hatred and fear, highlighting how these emotions can complement each other in destructive ways. According to him, cowardice is seen as a uniquely painful vice, bringing pain both in anticipation and in experience and in memory. Hatred, on the other hand, offers certain perverse pleasures and serves as a form of compensation for the horrors of fear. A person feeling fear may resort to hatred as a means of rewarding themselves for the discomfort they feel, so that the greater the fear, the greater the potential for hatred. Additionally, Screwtape points out that hatred can serve as an anesthetic for shame, suggesting that this feeling can help cover up the pain of humiliation or guilt. 24. This indeed is probably one of the enemy's motives for creating a dangerous world, a world in which moral issues really come to the point. He sees as well as you do that courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality. Screwtape suggests that one of God's motivations in creating a world full of dangers is that such conditions bring moral issues to the point, or to a critical juncture where true virtues can be revealed and tested. In this context, courage is not just one virtue among many, but the essential form of all virtues at the moment of their most rigorous test. Thus, courage is seen as the manifestation of any virtue at the point of its highest reality and under maximum pressure. In conclusion, I hope you enjoyed this video and found value in it. If you appreciated the content and wish to see more videos like this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications so you don't miss future videos. Additionally, don't forget to check out other videos suggested on the screen. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next video.